The battle was already lost. Humanity's fleets, once a proud testament to their technological might, were reduced to shattered wrecks drifting in the void. The Exilari Dominion had brought overwhelming force. Thousands of warships, each bristling with alien weaponry that outclassed anything humans could muster. The United Terran Navy had fought valiantly, but valor didn't stop plasma lances from ripping through hulls, or Dominion boarding parties from slaughtering entire crews. Admiral Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Ulysses, his jaw clenched as he watched the battle play out on the holo display. Dozens of human ships blinked out as Dominion fire tore through their formations. His own fleet, the last surviving battle group, was down to a handful of warships, escorting a convoy of civilian and support vessels. He had only one choice left: retreat. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Fleet Command," his comms officer reported. Voss didn't need to hear it. He already knew the order. "All remaining ships, this is Fleet Admiral Lang." The message came through, laced with static and despair. "The sole defense line has fallen. Earth is lost. You are ordered to withdraw to fallback coordinates and..." The transmission cut off as the command station was annihilated by a Dominion battleship. Silence hung over the Ulysses bridge. A younger officer would have let grief consume them, but Voss was past grief. He had seen too many planets burn, too many friends die. All that was left now was survival. "Get me a system scan," he ordered. "We need an escape vector." "Sir, the Dominion has us surrounded," his tactical officer said grimly. "We won't make it to any of the fallback points." Voss turned toward the sensor officer. "Options." "There's an anomaly in the system," she reported, eyes scanning the data. "Unstable. Readings are all over the place, but it's large enough to engulf the fleet. It could be some kind of wormhole." Voss studied the display. The anomaly pulsed like a storm in the fabric of space, its energy signatures shifting unpredictably. It could be a death sentence, or it could be their only chance. The Dominion flagship, a monstrous vessel the size of a small city, loomed closer, weapons charging for a final barrage. Voss knew they wouldn't get a second chance. "All ships," he said, voice steady, "full burn, head straight for the anomaly." There was no hesitation. The fleet moved as one, engines roaring as they surged toward the unknown. The Dominion, sensing their desperation, fired everything they had. Explosions erupted across the fleet as ships took heavy fire, but they did not slow. As the first human ships reached the event horizon, the anomaly reacted violently. Space twisted, reality itself seemed to shatter. And then, in a blinding flash, the Ulysses and the last remnants of humanity's lost fleet vanished. For the Dominion, the battle was over. For the lost fleet, their war was just beginning. The fleet emerged from the anomaly into a darkness deeper than any void charted by human maps. The stars were unfamiliar, ancient constellations, long dead by Earth's reckoning, surrounded them like distant ghosts. The transition had been violent. Ships tumbled out of the rift with failing systems, some colliding, others venting atmosphere from cracked hulls. The Ulysses rocked violently as its inertial dampeners struggled to stabilize. "Status." Admiral Elias Voss barked, gripping the command rail as the bridge flickered with emergency lighting. The reports came in, chaotic and grim. Several escort ships were gone, lost either to Dominion fire or torn apart during transit. Many others were heavily damaged. But they were alive. Against all odds, they had escaped. "Where the hell are we?" muttered Commander Leon Rourke, the fleet's chief navigator. Her hands danced across the holo display, scanning the region. "Unknown space," she answered, frustration in her voice. "No known beacons, no mapped systems. We're so far off the charts, we might as well be in another galaxy." Voss exhaled slowly. No reinforcements, no allies, just the remnants of a dying species adrift in the dark. He turned to his crew. "Then we make this our galaxy." The first trial. Survival was the only priority. The fleet limped toward the nearest planetary system, a dull red sun with a scattering of barren worlds. Scans showed little life, but one planet held a thin, toxic atmosphere and deep mineral deposits. It wasn't habitable, but it was useful. The order was given. They would establish their first foothold here. The work was grueling. Stranded engineers converted the wreckage of fallen ships into makeshift habitats. Miners descended into the planet's crust to harvest resources. Scientists worked around the clock, adapting human technology to these new uncharted conditions. Every able-bodied soldier drilled relentlessly, preparing for the day the Dominion would come looking. But the Dominion wasn't the only threat. The forgotten enemy. As they expanded their operations, the Vanguard encountered their first alien presence, a silent fleet of derelict warships, half buried in the ice of a distant moon. The ruins were old, centuries, perhaps millennia, abandoned. But the scars on the hulls told a story of war, a war they had lost. Dr. Celine Avasarala, the fleet's lead scientist, analyzed the remains. Whatever fought here wasn't the Dominion, she said, frowning at the data. These weapons, this technology, it's completely unknown to us. Voss studied the wreckage. This place wasn't just empty space. Something had lived here. Something had died here. And something had done the killing. Then the first distress signal came in. One of the Vanguard's patrol teams, sent to explore a derelict station, had gone silent. No warnings, no final transmissions. Just silence. The fleet had escaped one war, but in the darkness of uncharted space, they had just stumbled into another. The distress signal had been weak, almost a whisper against the cosmic noise. But its meaning was clear. Something had taken the patrol team. Admiral Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the Ulysses, eyes locked on the tactical display. The missing soldiers had been exploring a massive derelict station orbiting a dead star. Its twisted metal remains suggested a brutal battle long ago, but the station itself showed faint power signatures. That meant something was still alive inside, or something had reawakened. Voss didn't hesitate. Prep a strike team. We're getting our people back. Into the void. A squad of elite Vanguard operatives, clad in advanced exo-rigs, deployed from a stealth corvette, gliding toward the station's hull. The lead soldier, Lieutenant Darrow, activated his helmet's tactical display, scanning for life signs. Still no response from the patrol team. His second-in-command, Sergeant Cato, muttered, "I don't like this." The team breached an airlock and stepped inside. The corridors were silent, save for the low hum of ancient machinery. Dust and debris floated in the zero-gravity environment. There were no bodies, no signs of a firefight, just empty halls filled with shadows. Then they found the first suit, a human exo-rig, shredded and covered in long, jagged gashes, drifted near a bulkhead. Blood droplets floated in the air like tiny crimson orbs. The helmet's visor had been clawed through. Whatever had attacked did so with terrifying precision. Darrow knelt beside the ruined armor, his jaw tightening. Something took them. Something fast. Then the motion sensors screamed. From the darkness of a collapsed corridor, something moved. Fast. Unnatural. The first soldier barely had time to turn before a blur of obsidian exoskeletons and razor-sharp limbs crashed into them. The soldier was yanked into the void with a choked scream. Gunfire erupted as the team opened fire, but the creatures moved like ghosts, darting along walls and ceilings. "Fall back! Fall back!" Darrow shouted, dragging the wounded soldier toward the exit. As they retreated, the station's dim emergency lights flickered to life, illuminating their attackers for the first time. The creatures were humanoid but wrong. Angular exoskeletons, fused with ancient machinery, dead eyes glowing with a sickly blue light. They were not just predators. They were something worse. They were survivors. The forgotten enemy rises. The team barely made it back to the corvette. As they burned hard for the fleet, Cato's breathing was ragged. What the hell were those things? Dr. Celine Avasarala studied the helmet footage in horror. They're remnants of whatever war happened here. But they're not just alive. She pointed at the eerie blue glow in the creatures' chests. They've adapted. They've turned themselves into something else. Voss clenched his fists. The Vanguard had assumed they were alone in the dark. They were wrong. And now, the enemy knew they had returned. The first battle in the new war happened faster than anyone expected. Admiral Elias Voss had barely reviewed the strike team's footage when the fleet's outer patrols detected movement. Dozens of alien vessels, sleek and predatory, emerging from the darkness. These were not Dominion ships. The creatures from the derelict station had warships of their own, long dormant, but now reawakened. Their hulls bore the same eerie fusion of metal and organic matter, pulsating with energy unlike anything the Vanguard had encountered. "They're testing us," Voss muttered, watching the incoming fleet. "They want to know if we're prey." Commander Leon Rourke stood beside him, her voice cold. "Then let's teach them what happens when you hunt humans." The ambush. Voss knew the Vanguard couldn't afford a direct confrontation. They were outnumbered and still rebuilding. But humans didn't fight fair. They adapted. He ordered the fleet to scatter, baiting the enemy into pursuit. The alien ships took the bait, hunting the Vanguard corvettes through asteroid fields and nebulae. Then, just as the enemy closed in, the Ulysses and her warships executed their trap. Concealed strike teams detonated charges on drifting wreckage, sending shrapnel into the enemy's formation. Vanguard assault ships decloaked and opened fire, tearing into the exposed vessels. The aliens moved fast, reacting with inhuman reflexes, but they hadn't fought humans before. They weren't prepared for the sheer brutality of human warfare. Within minutes, half their fleet was crippled. The rest retreated. It wasn't just a victory. It was a message. The Vanguard was no prey. The search for allies. With their first victory secured, Voss turned to the next phase of the war. The Dominion was still out there, enslaving what remained of humanity. If the Vanguard wanted to win, they needed more than just soldiers. They needed allies. The problem: most of the galaxy had already written off humanity as a dead species. "Then we remind them who we are," Voss said. Scouts were dispatched to hunt for survivors, human or otherwise. And soon, the reports started coming in. There were whispers of human colonies that had survived Dominion rule, hidden in the fringes of space. There were enslaved labor camps, where broken men and women toiled under alien whips. And there were Dominion warlords, still profiting from Earth's fall, who had no idea that humanity's darkest nightmare had returned. Voss made his decision. "The Vanguard will not hide. We will not run." His voice echoed through the fleet. "Every human in chains will be freed. Every Dominion coward who stood by as Earth burned will suffer. And every species that thought we were extinct will learn the truth." His officers waited for his final command. "Set course for the nearest Dominion stronghold. We start with blood." The war had begun. And this time, humanity was the terror in the dark. The Vanguard struck like a phantom war machine, hitting Dominion outposts and disappearing before retaliation could come. Every battle was precise, ruthless. Humanity had evolved beyond the desperate fighters they once were. Now, they were predators, and the Dominion was bleeding. But the Dominion was vast, and its rulers were no fools. The attack sent shockwaves through their empire. And soon, the inevitable response arrived. The hunt had begun. The unseen noose. Deep within Dominion space, Grand Warlord Center watched the battle reports with growing rage. Humanity was supposed to be broken, reduced to little more than scattered slaves, their homeworld a husk. But these new reports spoke of something else. Ships that moved too fast. Soldiers that fought with terrifying efficiency. Entire fleets vanishing in coordinated ambushes. "This is not the same enemy we defeated," Center growled, his armored claws curling into a fist. "This is something worse." He gave the order. Every Dominion fleet not actively engaged in war was redirected toward one goal: the extermination of the Vanguard. A galaxy on fire. The Dominion's counterattack was relentless. Planetary governors, fearing the wrath of their overlords, began executing human prisoners by the millions. Resistance cells were rooted out and burned. Propaganda spread across the stars, declaring the Vanguard nothing more than a dying ember, an illusion that would soon be snuffed out. But the Vanguard did not break. They adapted. On the shattered colony of Drakkar IV, a human slave uprising was crushed under Dominion boots, until Vanguard strike teams fell from the sky. Armored soldiers emerging from the dust like specters. With brutal precision, they dismantled Dominion war machines and executed the alien overlords who had enslaved their people. Word spread faster than the Dominion could silence it. The lost fleet had returned, and it would never stop. The turning point. As the Dominion tightened its grip, Voss knew they needed to do more than just strike and retreat. They needed a decisive blow, one that would shatter the enemy's morale and ignite rebellion across the stars. His target was bold, perhaps suicidal. The war factory of Velker Prime. Velker Prime was the Dominion's largest shipyard, responsible for producing nearly a third of its war fleet. It was a fortress, protected by orbital defenses, dreadnought fleets, and legions of Dominion soldiers. An attack would be impossible, unless the enemy never saw it coming. The Shadow Strike. Using stolen Dominion codes and captured ships, the Vanguard infiltrated the system under the guise of a returning patrol. With precision honed from centuries of warfare, they bypassed security and slipped into the heart of the Dominion's war machine. The moment the alarm sounded, it was already too late. Vanguard saboteurs triggered cascading reactor failures, igniting the core of Velker Prime. The sky turned to fire as one of the largest shipyards in Dominion history erupted into a storm of destruction. As the Ulysses led the fleet away from the burning wreckage, Voss watched the flames spread. This was not just another strike. This was the first crack in the Dominion's armor. And soon, the whole empire would fall. The destruction of Velker Prime reverberated across the galaxy, but it was on Earth where the true impact was felt. For generations, humanity had been shackled, its once great cities reduced to slave labor camps. The Dominion had made sure the flames of rebellion were extinguished, but they had underestimated something vital: human hope. When the first ships of the Vanguard appeared over Earth's atmosphere, the message was simple: humanity had returned. It wasn't a military campaign that began their liberation. It was a whisper in the dark, a radio transmission broadcast across the shattered remnants of Earth's network from a voice long thought lost. Do not kneel. Do not despair. The Vanguard has come. Fight. And humanity answered. The spark of rebellion. Beneath the iron grip of the Dominion, Earth had been reduced to a planet of broken spirits, its population kept docile through fear and starvation. But in the underground tunnels, in the darkest corners of cities once considered the heart of civilization, the fires of rebellion never died. Resistance cells, once fragmented and isolated, received the signal. They rose from the ashes, awakening with one purpose: to fight. At the heart of New Tokyo, where the Dominion kept its most significant control center, the first coordinated uprising began. Ex-slaves, disillusioned Dominion soldiers, and freedom fighters surged into the streets. The rebellion spread across the globe, an uncontainable wildfire that swept through cities. The Dominion's leadership scrambled to contain the uprising, but their methods were already antiquated. Humanity was no longer afraid. Admiral Voss watched from the command deck of the Ulysses as planetary scans revealed the explosion of resistance. "This is just the beginning," he said, voice calm but filled with cold certainty. "We'd free every soul on this planet." The battle for Earth. But the Dominion was not blind to the threat humanity posed. As word of the uprising spread, the Dominion sent its elite forces to crush the rebellion before it could gain momentum. They were not the mindless enforcers from before. These were the Dominion's highest generals, ruthless and cunning, trained in the arts of war with decades of experience. They weren't prepared for what they faced. Humanity had learned from their past mistakes. In the cities, once symbols of human civilization, the Vanguard had provided advanced weaponry and tactics, turning ordinary men and women into soldiers in the blink of an eye. Voss's strategy was deceptively simple. Make them afraid, he had told his officers. Once they are afraid, they will be weak. The first wave of Dominion reinforcements arrived in orbit, only to find their ships immobilized by a barrage of electromagnetic pulses. The second wave, an entire fleet of battle-hardened warships, was struck down by Vanguard stealth corvettes equipped with technology the Dominion had never seen. Voss didn't just want to crush the Dominion's forces, he wanted to break their will to fight. And in the heart of the Dominion-controlled capital, the final blow was struck. As Dominion troops marched into a civilian district, expecting easy resistance, they were met by a wave of insurgents who had been trained in guerrilla warfare. Led by a human commander once thought to be lost, Sergeant Aidan Cole, a hero of the old Terran fleets, the rebels tore into the invaders with brutal efficiency. The Dominion forces faltered, stunned by the ferocity of the humans they had once enslaved. The resistance grew bolder. Overwhelming numbers of Dominion troops were slaughtered as the city burned. When the Dominion attempted to deploy their most formidable asset, an orbital strike, they found that the Vanguard had already infiltrated their satellite systems, turning their own weaponry against them. The fall of the Iron Hand. In the midst of chaos, Captain Voss led a team of elite Vanguard warriors to the Dominion's planetary command center. As they fought their way through waves of alien soldiers, they reached the heart of the station, where the Dominion governor awaited in his fortified tower. The governor's face was filled with arrogance as he faced the human force, but Voss didn't speak. He didn't need to. With a single order, the Vanguard ripped through the walls, and the governor's fortress fell. It was done. Earth was free, and the Dominion would never again hold the reins of power. The victory over Earth was more than just the liberation of a planet. It was the spark that ignited the collapse of the Dominion. As word spread through the galaxy, systems that had once been oppressed, alien colonies that had feared the might of the Dominion, began to rise in revolt. The Dominion was an empire built on fear, and once its foundation cracked, it unraveled swiftly. The Vanguard's reputation as an unstoppable force spread like wildfire, and even the most distant systems saw the signs of impending doom. But the Dominion had one final card to play. Silara, their capital, the beating heart of their empire. It was here that the ruling council resided, where their most powerful war fleets were stationed, and where the greatest of their technologies were kept under lock and key. Silara was fortified by a web of defenses so intricate and lethal that even the Vanguard's most seasoned officers had doubts. But Voss knew that the war could not be won without striking at the center of Dominion power. The Dominion's heart is on Silara, Voss said, his voice cold as ice. And we're going to rip it out. The long march to Silara. The fleet had barely recovered from the battle for Earth, and yet they pressed on, their engines roaring through space toward the heart of the Dominion. The journey would not be easy. Silara was a system surrounded by layers of defenses, ancient weapon platforms designed to stop any foe from approaching. Every inch of space was booby-trapped, and the Dominion knew how to fight in their own home turf. But the Vanguard had learned to adapt, improvise, and the human spirit could not be crushed. Their engineers, once underfunded and overlooked, had become masters of innovation. They rigged old Dominion weaponry to turn against its creators. Their best tacticians, once underestimated by the Dominion, had outwitted the enemy at every turn. And their soldiers, battle-hardened by the losses they had endured, were prepared to do whatever it took to bring down the Dominion. The Vanguard fleet began its approach in the dead of night, slipping through asteroid fields and dark nebulae to avoid detection. The closer they got to Silara, the more formidable the defenses became. Massive automated defense stations loomed like silent gods, their weapons bristling and ready. But the Vanguard knew their time was coming. They had faced worse odds. And then the fleet struck. The Siege of Silara. Silara's orbital defenses lit up the sky, launching a massive counterattack. Dozens of Dominion dreadnoughts, their hulls reinforced with layers of alien alloys, rose from the planet's surface to intercept the Vanguard fleet. For the first time since the war began, Voss found himself facing the full force of the Dominion's military might. The sheer scale of the battle was beyond anything he had imagined. Vast fleets of ships swirling around Silara, engaging in a deadly dance of destruction. But the Vanguard did not flinch. The Ulysses led the charge, cutting through the darkness with surgical precision. Vanguard stealth bombers infiltrated the Dominion's lines, planting devastating EMP charges and disabling entire fleets. The Dominion retaliated with wave after wave of fighters and missile barrages, but each strike only seemed to fuel the Vanguard's drive. The battle raged for hours, but it was a battle of attrition. The Dominion ships were powerful, but they had grown complacent, used to overwhelming their foes. They hadn't fought humans who had nothing left to lose. As their forces dwindled, panic began to set in. The Dominion's upper echelon had underestimated the relentless fury of a people fighting for their survival. At the heart of the battle, Voss made his move. He ordered a full assault on Silara's surface, a desperate, all-or-nothing maneuver. As his fleet descended into the planet's atmosphere, flanked by Vanguard ground troops in exorigs, he could see the glimmer of victory on the horizon. Silara would burn, and with it, the Dominion's reign would collapse. The final push. With the Vanguard's relentless assault shaking Silara to its core, the final defense fell. As Dominion warships scattered and fled, Admiral Voss's flagship, the Ulysses, moved into orbit above the capital. There, the last of the Dominion's leaders awaited. When Voss entered the Dominion's central command complex, now reduced to rubble, he was met by a single figure. The Supreme Commander, once the most feared being in the galaxy. The commander was old, frail, yet his eyes still burned with the fire of a dying empire. "You think you've won, human?" The commander spat, his voice hoarse with desperation. "You cannot destroy an empire like mine." Voss stepped forward, his voice unwavering. "We already have." With that, the final blow was struck. The Dominion fell, and with it, the reign of terror that had haunted the galaxy for centuries. Silara burned, and humanity's new age had begun. The war was over. The Dominion's capital, Silara, now lay in ruin, its once proud cities turned to ash. The empire that had once stretched across the stars was no more, crumbling under the weight of its arrogance and cruelty. Admiral Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the Ulysses, looking out over the shattered remnants of Silara. The battle was won, but the cost had been immense. The Vanguard fleet, though victorious, was in tatters. Many ships had been lost. Many lives had been sacrificed. Yet in the distance, Earth's green and blue visage floated peacefully, a symbol of the new beginning they had all fought for. "We've done it," Commander Lion Rourke said, her voice carrying a mix of relief and weariness. "We've broken them." Voss nodded but said nothing. There was no celebration, no time for joy. The galaxy was in ruins. The Dominion's fall had left a power vacuum, and the remaining warlords and opportunists already began circling like vultures, eager to seize what remained of the once feared empire. The true battle was only beginning. The rebuilding. As the Vanguard returned to Earth, the task ahead was monumental. A planet torn apart by generations of war and occupation needed to be rebuilt. The human race had been scattered, broken by the Dominion's enslavement, but their spirit had not died. What was once a dying ember was now a blazing fire. The United Terran Republic, resurrected from the ashes of its former glory, was reborn. Colonies that had been isolated, fighting alone against the Dominion, began to reunite. There was no illusion of easy peace. Trust had to be rebuilt, new alliances forged, and enemies from the past had to be dealt with. But for the first time in centuries, humanity controlled its fate. Voss stood before the global assembly on Earth, the leaders of the human colonies, the remnants of resistance groups, and the scattered survivors from every corner of the galaxy. Their faces, once filled with hopelessness, now bore the resolve of a people who had known the darkness and were ready to bring light back into the stars. "Our war is not over," Voss said, his voice strong, carrying the weight of everything they had lost. "But we have reclaimed our freedom. We stand as a beacon to those who have been oppressed, to those who thought they would never see the light again. Humanity is no longer a relic of the past. We are the future." The room erupted in applause, but Voss could not join them. The war might have ended, but there were still too many loose threads, too many broken pieces to stitch together. The galaxy, though freed from the Dominion's iron grip, had been left fractured. Warlords, remnants of the Dominion's military, and countless other factions vie for power, and some human colonies would not be as eager to forgive the atrocities of the past. There would be those who would test humanity's resolve. And even now, the whispers of new threats echoed in the dark. The road ahead. Admiral Voss knew that the fight for survival would never truly end. There were always those who would seek to conquer, to control, to subjugate. But there was something else too, something humanity had rediscovered in the fire of war: their unity. The Vanguard, once an isolated fleet of survivors, had now become a symbol of hope and defiance. It was more than a military force. It was a promise. The promise that no matter the cost, humanity would never bow to tyranny again. They would rebuild, and they would rise, time and again. Voss turned to his officers, his crew, and the fighters who had stood by him through it all. "We are not done," he said quietly. "We've shown them what humanity can do. Now we build a future, a galaxy that knows the name of Earth, not in fear, but in respect." In the stars beyond, the remnants of the Dominion's former allies gathered in the shadows, uncertain of what to do next. The galaxy was no longer a place of oppression, but of infinite possibility. The old empire was dead. Humanity had risen from its ashes, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson it had learned. The war was over, but the journey had just begun.